Podnutz Daily for December 22nd, 2008, episode number 126. Let's go a little bit over grounding here. You guys probably heard of grounding. It's really important if you're working with electronics, especially motherboards, hard drives, things that could get fried. If you're in an area that has a carpet and you're walking around on it, you usually are going to have some static electricity build up on you. So when you touch a motherboard, you could give it a shock or burn it out or something. It's dangerous, so you want to ground yourself whenever you're working with these electronics. I don't like to wear a grounding strap personally, but I will, as I'm working with something, try to always have my hand on something that's grounding me. For example, I'll hold the arm of my table, which is a metal table, because I know that that's grounded. I know something's grounded if you rub your feet around on the ground and then touch that thing and you get a shock. If you don't get a shock, you're not grounded. Now, I'm not too familiar with the concept. I wasn't too familiar with the concept, like exactly how something gets grounded. I thought that something needed to be like in the ground, like something metal or a conductor that actually goes into the ground. And it's actually the case, but I didn't think, for example, a table that was just sitting on the carpet of the floor of my shop would be grounded. But it actually is, because you get a shock from it. I couldn't believe it so much that I did a little experiment with my dad where we took an old motherboard, one that's already fried, and I walked around on the table, and I had him hold the motherboard by a little plastic edge of the motherboard in his hand. And I rubbed my feet on the ground, and I went and I tried to touch that motherboard to try to get a shock from it. And because he's holding it from a piece of plastic, just a little piece of plastic, holding it up in the air, it's not grounded. Now, if he had it in his hand and he was actually standing on the rug, then I would get a shock from the motherboard. But if you hold it like in a little piece or hang it from like a piece of string or something like that, it's not going into ground, so you're not going to get a shock, so it's not grounded. It was very interesting to me. You should do a couple experiments in your shop and see what's grounded. See what you get a shock from. If something is grounded, then technically you could do a job by have your body being in contact with that thing while you're doing the job, and you'll be okay. You won't have to worry about static electricity because you're basically grounded. I think that's right. Yeah, my dad is an electrician, and I'm just reading what Kins is saying in the chat room. And yes, that's why he was trying to tell me that I was an idiot. And not really, he didn't say that. But, because I was saying, no, I don't think that this is grounded. I don't think this, he's like, it has to be in contact with a ground point to be grounded. He's like, it can't be floating in the air and be grounded. So that's why I did that little experiment, because I wanted to see if he was right. And he was. Okay. Next thing I want to talk about is I tried to clone a 160 gigabyte laptop hard drive onto a 320 gigabyte laptop hard drive. Now, I use Acronis to do this. There's a couple ways you can do it with Acronis. You can do a proportional. It's called a proportional clone, where, see, the problem is this computer had a recovery partition. So there's two partitions I needed to clone. And because I'm going from a smaller hard drive to a bigger hard drive, Acronis can proportionally increase the size of each partition onto the new hard drive, which would mean that the recovery partition would be like 50 gig, and the other partition, which was like 100 and something, would be like 200 gig or something like that. However it works out, it would just be proportionally big. And I don't want to have a recovery partition that's, it doesn't have to be any more than 10 gig, so it would be a waste of space. So the other way to do it is an as-is clone. So it basically takes the size of the partitions as they are and clones them to the new drive as the size that they are. Except now I have all this extra unallocated free space that's not even partitioned for the main partition. And I couldn't finagle Acronis enough to get the partitions the way I want. So I just did it as is, knowing that later I could go into Vista and expand the partition, the big partition, if I needed to expand it to fill out the whole size of the 320 gigabyte drive. So I cloned it twice, I tried, and everything went smooth. It said congratulations at the end. I took out the old hard drive, I put in the new drive, and it wouldn't boot from that drive. So it must not be cloning some vital part that I need to clone to get that drive to boot. If anybody knows what's going on with that, give me an email. Okay, we're also using Recover My Files. A person actually did a Windows format, a Windows reinstall, Windows XP on their hard drive. I assume they did a quick format because when they rebooted their system, all their files were missing. And they didn't really know what they were doing, so they brought it into us. They said, we reinstalled Windows and none of our files are there anymore. So that can happen on a regular install without actually formatting, because the new user accounts have to be created when you reinstall Windows. So files may be hidden in old user accounts that aren't showing up on the actual operating system. So you got to look in the Documents and Settings folder and see if there's any user folders in there that aren't showing up on like the welcome screen. Well, we checked. There was no other user folders in there that were just hidden, so we knew that they were actually deleted or formatted over or erased. So we used a program called Recover My Files, and we went back and we got, we recovered like 20 or so gig of files, and we're putting that onto a separate hard drive now. It takes a long time, so it might run overnight. But it looks like we're going to be able to recover all their data with Recover My Files. Now, Recover My Files is a low-level, recovery program, and I've been using it for about a year or so now, and I like it. I did the latest Podnutz, though, the weekly show Podnutz with Thor Schrock, who from Schrock Innovations in Lincoln, Nebraska, who actually opened up his own data recovery service as part of his computer shop. And the whole podcast is about how he went about doing that, the equipment you need to do that. And I brought up the programs I use, and he gives programs that he uses, and they're a little more expensive than what I'm using, but they seem like they're really, really good stuff. So I'm going to have that podcast edited and released tonight, so everybody wants to watch Podnutz, they can do that. Okay, a Dell Dimension 4550. I hate these computers. This is like the 8200 model or 8000 model, where it opens up like a hinge. It's a huge, heavy tower, and it opens up on a hinge rather than you take the side of the case off to open the case. It's a desktop, and you press the button on the top or bottom, and you slide it, pull it open, it opens on the hinge. I hate these machines. You got to be careful with these machines. The reason I'm bringing it up, nothing was really wrong. This was a routine job. But I remembered in the past, if you open those cases up, and they can open up on a 90-degree angle. First, it opens up like a 45. Then if you open it up, push a little extra force, you can get up to 90, which it's meant to do. It's not breaking or bending anything. But the cables in those cases are so short, because they're meant only for that case, that if you open it up at 90, the cables could possibly pop out of the motherboard. I'm talking about the IDE cables, mainly for the CD drives. You got to watch that. It happened one time. We closed it all back up. We didn't know why the CD drives were working anymore. We wasted a bunch of time, and then we found out it was actually just because when you open that computer up, the cables are all scrunched in there, and as you're opening it up and it's unscrunching the cable, it could actually use enough force to pull it out of the slot.